And that's on raffle in the raffle room, in case you hadn't noticed that. Dr. Harvey is an expert in public speaking, having authored 2 books on the subject and 6 sets of training DVDs on topics including finding your topic, body language, writing keynotes, speaking in 3 dimensions, speech development and editing, and a myriad of other topics. Randy has been married to his lovely wife, Shelley, for 37 years. Woohoo! With 3 grown children and 6 grandchildren. The 7th will arrive in January. He makes his home in the lovely hamlet of Sherwood, Oregon. He is a graduate of the University of Oregon and Eastern Oregon University, holding a PhD from the U of O, a JD from Concord Law School, a master's from Eastern Oregon University, as well as 2 bachelor's degrees. I suddenly feel uneducated. His World Championship speech, Lessons from Fat Dad, may be viewed on YouTube. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Randy J. Harvey.
Oft I sing for my friends when death's cold hand I see. Will they turn and walk away, or will they sing one song for me? I wonder who will sing for me when I'm called to cross that silent sea. Who will sing for me? I'm going to let you in on a secret. Every human being on the face of the planet has a life. But equally important, and the topic of our conversation today, not every human being lives. Everyone has a life, but not everyone lives. Now, I'm going to ask you a few questions today, and this is going to be a little bit of participation, and just in case those of you in the very back of the room get the idea that I'm not paying attention, I was a middle school principal for 9 years. I've already got your number, and it's not above or beyond my ability to make my way to the back of the room when necessary. 3 questions. How many of you remember a teacher in your educational experience? Wait a minute, get to the end. Have you heard of the pregnant pause? That was one of them. Toastmasters, I tell you. How many of you remember a teacher in your experience that made such a difference in your life, they may even have turned your life around? Look at all those hands. Let's honor them today. On the count of 3, I want you to say their name out loud. 1, 2, 3. Mr. Jason. Now, I want you to know that person is immortal. Think about it. For some of you, you remember them decades later. Some of you, maybe half centuries. That person is immortal because they made a difference in your life. Second question. How many of you remember a teacher that was so bad, so horrible, that if you're kind of quick back there, you raised your hand before I finished my question. You weren't listening the first time I explained it. How many of you remember a teacher that was so bad that if you could have slashed their tires without getting caught, you would have done it? Raise your hand. 1, 2, let's say their name in honor of their immortality. 1, 2, 3, Mr. Lancaster. Mr. Lancaster isn't in this room, I hope. I think he died a long time ago. I got a telegram from hell. That teacher also is immortal. They made such a difference in your life that you have never forgotten them. Correct? In fact, some of you have said to yourselves, I'm never going to be like that person. I'm never going to do that to a child. That person is immortal. They changed your life in such an impactful way that you will never be the same again. You see, people can be immortal because they are wonderful. People can also be immortal because they are terrible. One more question. Think back through all those years of school that you attended. Cleon, all 6 grades. Don't feel bad, Leon. Alan only did 5. Think back through all those grades that you attended in school. Now, answer this question for me. Do you remember a year in your educational experience, but you cannot remember the name of the teacher? Anyone? Raise your hand. Look at those hands, would you? Now, why do I ask that question? You remember the great teacher. You remember the horrible teacher. But the real tragedy in these series of questions is the teacher you don't remember. You see, they had you in your educational experience for an entire year. And that adult human being made so little impact on your life that you cannot remember who they are. And that, my friends, is a tragedy. They had you for an entire year, and you cannot remember who they are. So my challenge for you today is be wonderful, be horrible, but never be so insignificant that no one remembers who you are. Unless, of course, you want law enforcement to forget who you are. My topic today is speaking from the heart. Messages that matter. In our culture today, we are misinformed, misled, and we misunderstand. We think in order to do something significant in life, we have to have a PhD, JD, be a world champion, be a movie star, be a president of Toastmasters International, do something, make a lot of money, own a big house. But my friends, those things aren't significant. That's not what makes you immortal. That's not what makes a difference in the lives of the people you want to make a difference in their life. When I was an undergrad at the university, Eastern Oregon University, now that's a model for it. It's 1,200 students, it's called the university. When I went there, it was Eastern Oregon State, and then it was Eastern Oregon State College, and now it's Eastern Oregon University. So I had my pick of saying where I graduated from. I can say, well, I graduated from Eastern Oregon State, Eastern Oregon College, and Eastern Oregon University. Yeah, I got the same 3 degrees. It was all from the same school. But that's not what makes us great. What makes us great is what we do with what we have, which is our life. And while I was studying as an undergrad, I took a course called Children's Literature. I figured it was an easy A, right? That's children's literature. And the teacher gave me a book on the reading list, The Hobbit, by J.R.R. Tolkien. Anyone read that book in here? How many of you seen the movie? The first half. It's a great movie. I've watched that movie several times. I've read the book. And when I read it, there was a conversation that occurred in it. It's almost as good as Star Trek or Star Wars. I said almost as good as Star Trek. Star Wars is far superior. I'm one of those 100 people that sucked up to Gary after he became famous. I think my lips are still attached, though. Sorry, I'm a hog. I was raised as a hog farmer, so I can be a little crude sometimes. Where was I? I was talking about, oh yes, J.R.R. Tolkien. There's a conversation that occurs towards the latter part of the book. It's a conversation between the Lady Galadriel, an elven queen, and Mithrandir, Gandalf to those of us who prefer that name. And she's curious, she says to Gandalf, why the Hobbit? And Gandalf becomes very serious and contemplative. And he has this little dialogue where he says, well, Saruman says it takes a person of great power to withstand evil. But I've not found that to be the case. To me, it's the simple people who engage in everyday acts. And when I heard that conversation, I thought to myself, the great culture of America has it wrong. It's not presidents and congressmen, doctors and lawyers. It's those of us who live our life every day with significance, engaging in those simple acts of kindness and purpose that make a difference in the lives of everyone whom we touch. And Gandalf continued that conversation. She said to him, well, why the Hobbit? He said, maybe it's because I'm afraid. And he gives me courage. Because in his simplicity, in his everyday simple acts, he made a difference. And a wizard of great power took strength and courage from one so simple, who engaged in simple acts of kindness. And when Bilbo was asked by the great troll king, the great, what word am I looking for? Not a troll. Dwarf king. He said, why are you helping us? He said, because I have a home and you don't. And so he engaged in this big journey. Well, why is this important? Why is any of this important? Because in the back of my mind, I believe that many of you are sitting here today and say, what do I have to contribute? I mean, I may be unemployed. I don't have a college education. I'm wondering what it is that I can do or say that's going to make a difference in the life of another human being. And if you get anything out of my conversation with you today, I hope you begin to understand that it's the simple acts of everyday living, the reaching out a helping hand, the conversations when people are down in the dumps. This morning when I left my home, my wife's father, my father, Marvin Worthy, a great man, is at our home in home hospice care at the end of his life. And the end will come within the next few days. And yesterday, as my grandkids, his grandkids, climbed on his bed and talked to him, it became readily apparent to me that this was a life well lived. He wasn't a PhD, he was a steel worker. But he took time to spend with his kids, water skiing and backpacking and camping and cooking potatoes and bacon and eggs, those things that give you coronaries. In fact, I'm the only one in my house of 4 adults that hasn't had bypass surgery. The point I'm making is that everyone needs someone to make a difference in their life, and you might be that someone that makes a difference in the life of another person. The story is told, and this is appropriate coming up on the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address on November 19th. As Lincoln was sitting in the White House, reviewing requests for clemency from soldiers who had deserted in the face of combat, hundreds. Families would hire people to lobby the presidents to give clemency, to spare the life of these soldiers who had deserted in the face of combat. Abraham Lincoln was reading through the list and signing the clemency orders or refusing to sign the clemency orders. And he came to one, a 19-year-old man who had run away at the Battle of Shiloh, deserted. The penalty? Death for desertion under fire. And Lincoln read the request of clemency written in the soldier's own hand, and he looked behind it to see if anyone had stepped up to support his request. And there was no one. He got up out of his chair and he walked out into the secretary's office and he said, "Hasn't anyone requested clemency for this soldier? Is anyone his friend?" And the secretary said, "No one, Mr. President." And in that moment, Abraham Lincoln said, "Well, I'll be his friend." And signed, sparing the young man's life. A simple act. The most powerful man on the planet at that moment in time condescended for a simple act of kindness. As Toastmasters, most of us have engaged in our experience in Toastmasters so we can find our voice, so we can talk about things that are really important to us. From time to time, I do trainings for National Speakers Association, and newbie wannabe speakers, wannabe professional speakers, you'll ask them, you'll say, "Well, what do you talk about?" And they go, "Well, I can talk about anything." "Well, I know, but what's your key topic?" "Well, what topic do you think it should be? What will I get paid for?" Have you had those conversations with people? Are they going to get hired? No. No. What I want you to understand today is how to find the message that only you can deliver. See, only Abraham Lincoln could sign that paper and give clemency to that young soldier. There are people that you know who you come in contact with. You may be the only person that can do the thing that they need in their life. The only one. How do you find the message that is uniquely yours? Now, some of you in this room know that I mentored and trained Ryan Avery. That was a difficult task. Oh, you know Ryan. He was only 24 years old at the time he was competing. Now, I look out through this room and I see a lot of gray heads. Some of them have been cured by Clairol. And I think to myself, would a 60-something pay attention to a 20-something? That falls in the powdered butt syndrome category. You know, you're not going to take financial advice or sexual advice from someone who is young enough that you could have powdered their butt and changed their diaper. Right? So how does a 20-something communicate to an aged audience like this and connect? Well, they better have a message that is unique to them, that is authentic. There are too many people in the world giving inauthentic messages, speeches that everyone in the audience goes, "I don't believe a word of that." Or, "I might believe some of it, but some of it is just too good to be true or too bad to be real." Right? My dog died, lost my job, had cancer, and you know the Toastmaster sympathy topics? Yeah. How do you find an authentic message? Well, there's 3 questions everyone needs to answer for themselves for a variety of reasons. And one of the best reasons why you should be taking notes over the next few minutes is most of you have difficulty coming up with topics to talk about. Some of you not so much. You can create a speech on your way to the club meeting in the car and deliver it. But those of you who really want to have impact and never lack for topics to talk about, if you follow these 3 things, answer these 3 questions, you will never lack for a topic, and you will always, always, always be authentic. The first question, and for those of you who like acronyms, it falls under the category WWW. Neither refers to the internet or a former president. WWW. First W. Who are you? That's the question. Who are you? The power of authenticity is to talk about things that are real to you. Right? The last time I checked, any identical twins in the room? Even identical twins are not identical, isn't that correct? I mean, physically they are, but usually there's 2 more opposite people in the world. Nobody is you. So what is it that you can contribute that nobody else can? And if you identify that, you'll always have something to talk about. First question, who are you? Who are you refers to the philosophy that you govern your life by. It is, if we break the word philosophy down, phileo is wisdom, and osophy is study, the study of wisdom. And as you examine your life, you'll find little snippets of wisdom that you've adopted in your however many years, your multiple decades, to lead your life by. These are the things you refer to when you have to make a decision. It's the overarching canopy for your life, your philosophy. Most people do not think about their personal philosophy. They don't answer the question, who am I? Some people have done it when they graduated from college and they wanted to get that first job, and the job application said, tell us your philosophy. Well, I don't eat small children, run over elderly people in crosswalks. No, philosophy is what is the wisdom that you lead your life by. Now, some people follow a religious philosophy that's based on a canon of collection of scriptural texts, whether it's Christianity or Islam, pick one. Some people structure their life on a philosophy of their spiritual life. Some people adopt other contexts. Some people believe in hedonism. If it feels good, do it. Live for today, for we all die tomorrow, right? Whatever the philosophy is, I want you to take the time in the next week or so to think about it. What is the wisdom that governs my life? And it's unique to you. What is the wisdom that governs my life? Take the time, yellow pad, glass of wine, feet up in front of a roaring fire, nice quiet music playing of your choice, and start writing. Write everything you can think about what your personal life philosophy is. And then set it aside. Wait a few days, come back to it, read it, edit it. Try to get it down to a half page if you can. This is a philosophy I live my life by. Now, why am I asking you to do that? Well, first of all, that is you. That's you. That's the basis for who you are, that philosophy that you live by. And if you begin to understand who you are, listen for this one. This is worth writing down. If you begin to understand who you are, you will never again let someone tell you who you are. You will never again let somebody tell you what you should be, because you've thought through, who am I? Who am I? Philosophy. That's important, because those who are connected with who they are will change the course of human history. Not just their history, but world history. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, the last time they met before they were both assassinated, Malcolm X walked up to Martin Luther King Jr. and said, we both want the same thing, but we go about it in different ways. Malcolm X was not above engaging in violence. Martin Luther King believed in peaceful resistance. Malcolm X said to Martin Luther King Jr., we are both about the same thing. We go about it in different ways. But we have one thing in common. We are both dead men. See, both Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X understood that if they continued to pursue the philosophy that they believed in, the life that they have adopted, the values that they assimilated, they would be murdered. They knew they were going to be murdered. Yet, they chose to continue because it was who they are. The second question is, what are you about? What are you about? First question, who are you? Second question, what are you about? Now the question, what are you about, has to do with the rules that you live your life by. It is the core values. Now there's a little baggage with core values, but I'm going to use it anyway. I'm a world champion. I don't have to compete again. Core values. Well, people have beliefs and they have core values, and those are the rules that they live their life by. The rules you live your life by. They are the rules you go to when you have to make a decision about something, but there's a difference between the two. Belief is something that you hold that you might change your opinion on if you get better evidence. Someone might be able to convince you differently. You know, like when your wife cooks a meal that you don't necessarily like, and you know, I don't really like this. Where are you sleeping tonight? Oh, this is wonderful. That's a belief, right? It can be changed. Behavior modification. But a core value is different. A core value is something that you may believe in so strongly that you would rather sacrifice your life than surrender that truth. So let me give you an example of the difference. Imagine two tall towers, two high-rise buildings in a major city in the United States, over 1,000 feet tall. Let's say they're in Chicago, these two fictitious towers. Now the reason I say that, I was in Chicago last week, actually Champaign, Illinois, and we didn't have any champagne, that is. And I talked about the Twin Towers in Chicago, and someone said, yes, there are no Twin Towers in Chicago. I said, surely there are two towers that are close together. Not that I know of. So two fictitious towers in Chicago, over 1,000 feet tall, and Chicago is known as a windy city, right? Right? Yes. Okay. I just want to make sure you're still awake. Some of you extra. And across, between those two towers, a distance of 300 feet apart, is a 3-inch steel cable. It's January 15th. The wind is blowing at 15 knots. I don't know how fast that is, but I hear it's fairly fast, 15 knots. I look out over the steel cable, and I see this sheen of ice. Anyone in this room for $1 million, would you cross that 3-inch steel cable in January, on January 15th, 15-knot crosswind, no safety devices at all? Anyone in this room cross that steel cable for $1 million? Raise your hand. I always have one absolute fool in the audience. And I have two here, one over here and one over there. Well, I know they just do it to ruin my illustration, but it doesn't work. That's why I say they're absolutely foolish if they cross that, because all the rest of us would be down there with a shovel scraping them up. No. What you demonstrated to me, except those two, was that money, $1 million, is not one of your core values. You're not going to risk your life for almost certain death because of $1 million, right? Right? Those of you who would, I would just suggest bankruptcy. It's a lot cheaper, and you eliminate your debt, and you wouldn't need the $1 million. Now let's change the scenario. you don't have a core value that says money is that important to me. I wouldn't risk my life for money. So here's the switch. Now on the other side is your 15-month-old child dangling by their fingertips. For some of you, it's a grandchild dangling by their fingertips. Their only hope of survival is someone crossing the wire. Now, how many of you would cross? Some of you are thinking, which child is it? I know. I have one of those. She's grown now, and she's given me 4 grandbabies, and that was all worth it, believe me. What you just illustrated is you don't have a core value that says money is all that important, but you would risk your personal life to save the life of a child. And for many of you in this room, it wouldn't matter what child it was. You would get out on that wire and shinny across to save the life of that child. That's a core value. Now, what's interesting about these core values is they exist in every area of our life. They exist in our business life, in our personal life, in our relationship life between our wife and our children or our significant other. They exist in every area of our life, and there are different core values that relate to the decisions that we have to make. Now, what's powerful about these core values is that if you own it, if you believe in it, if you're willing to sacrifice your life for it, do you think an audience will listen when you talk about it? Yeah, absolutely. If you've ever watched Martin Luther King Jr. speak in the latter part of his life, there was almost a somberness to his speaking. Anyone know what I'm talking about? A melancholy that covered his body, his whole presentation. Even when you watch the I Have a Dream speech, there's almost a melancholiness to his presentation. What you're seeing in that presentation, in his speaking, is the realization that this will cost me my life, but I have to deliver the message. I can't give up. I have to proceed on. The power of conviction. The power to speak on something that you believe in so strongly that you would be willing to sacrifice your life on that topic. Let me tell you, Toastmasters, if you talk about those areas, those core values that you're willing to sacrifice your life for, if you're speaking on that topic, the audience will listen because you're speaking from your heart. If you speak from your heart, the world will listen. If you lead from your heart, the world will follow. Now the last question, the third W. What are you about? Who are you? What are you about? And the third question, where'd you learn that? See, if we go to your core values, if we identify one of your core values, and we trace it back in your life, we will find a person or an event that solidified that core value in your life. And if you tell that story, Toastmasters, the audience will listen. Let me give you an example. How many of you remember when you had an experience in your life when you learned not to lie? Raise your hand. Look around. How many of you, Gary, you didn't raise your hand, I noticed. How many of you, you've heard this before, how many of you remember the experience in your life when you learned not to steal? Raise your hand. Notice all the liars and thieves in Toastmasters? How many of you remember this one when you learned not to backtalk your mama? You know what I learned? Don't stand so close when you backtalk. I just told you a very simple story about learning not to lie, right? Backtalking your mama. Everyone in this room can tell this story, but it's going to be different. You got a different mama. We're brothers and sisters from a different mother. The power of this story. Now, I'm running short on time, but I'm going to tell this story anyway. After I won the World Championship of Public Speaking, I was invited to go to Amman, Jordan, an Islamic country. to talk about my world championship speech and to teach them about speaking. I delivered lessons from Fat Dad. Then we did the Q&A, questions and answers. And in the back of the room, way back in the back of the room, a gray-haired, slender man stood up, raised his hand. I called on him. He said, "Dr. Harvey," I knew I was in trouble. "Dr. Harvey, I came to hear an inspirational, motivational speech, and it seems to me like your speech was just a collection of stories." The whole audience went. Because in the Islamic world, you don't insult your guests by asking obnoxious questions, right? Obnoxious questions. So now before I left to go to Amman, Jordan, my wife said to me, "Randy, you behave yourself because I don't want your head coming home in a bag." She knew I had a tendency to be naughty at times. So while he was still standing up, I thought back to my middle school experience and I struck my best Jack Benny pose. Some of you remember Jack Benny. I said, "Let me ask you a question." And this is where it got dicey. The Prophet Muhammad, 1,000 Muslims in the audience. The Prophet Muhammad, blessings on his name, did he tell stories? The audience goes, "Yes!" That was like sick 'em to a bulldog. The Prophet Jesus, blessings on his name, did he tell stories? Yes! The Holy Quran, does it tell stories? Yes! The audience was really getting into this. The Holy Bible, does it tell stories? Yes! I said, well, that settles it. God is a storyteller. If it's good enough for him, I'm not changing it. Actually happened, the audience erupted in laughter. He wilted into his chair like a troublesome sixth grader and was never seen of again. Here's the lesson. Every major religion of the world teaches its sacred truths with a story. If you tell a story in support of how you learned or the person who taught you the core value that you hold, people will remember it. Remember, you don't have to be a person of great power to make a difference in this world. You simply have to live and move and be conscious of the difference that you can make in the life of the people you touch. You can be immortal. Simply answer the question, who am I? What am I about? And where did I learn it? And keep this in mind. If you speak from your heart, the world will listen. If you lead from your heart, the world will follow. If you live from your heart, you will always know contentment. Fellow Toastmasters.
I know I feel inspired now. On that high, we now get to actually prepare ourselves for the business meeting and understand that the stories that we're going to be telling ourselves will create the future of District 7. How is that for tying it together? Does that work? So we're going to have a very, very, very short break.